Welcome back to Naval Action and episode 68 of A Letter to the King. If you're new to the series, this is my attempt to keep us up to date with what's going on the global PvP server, the server that never sleeps. Before we get into the action that was this week, let's remind ourselves as to where we were at the close of the previous week. The Brits had started their campaign against the US in the Gulf. The Danes and the French were knocking seven shades of I don't know what out of each other up here. The Dutch had had a go down here at Trinidad, I think, but had failed to capture the port after what looked like quite a good port battle. The pirates had finished off their campaign in the Bahamas and had captured Savannah when the American first-rate fleet, or what was the defensive fleet, it was half first-rate and half not first-rate, chose to save their ships rather than defend Savannah, something that would have ramifications for the US over the next week as significant numbers of US players decided to cash in their treasonous notes and jump nations, some to the pirates, and some to other nations. Apart from that, I think I've probably got it all. The Swedes picked up the Boven wins, I think, and doubled their holdings. So I think that was it in the previous week. Let's have a little look at our political alignment as best we can. So you'll see I've moved the Brits and Americans to non-aggression. I'll cover that during the episode. The French and the Danes, you would probably need a political degree to understand what's going on here. There was a whole bunch of port swapping, basically hitting each other outside of each other's prime times predominantly, and ports were falling left, right and centre. The Leeward Islands, Basse-Terre, Grand-Terre, Boven Winds, Dominica, the Virgin Islands, San Juan, and the Virgin Islands again, all faring in this absolute swapathon. God help the locals in those ports. They mustn't know which flag to hang out the window half the time. And then later in the week, a formal announcement was made in the political section of the global forums declaring peace had broken out between the Danes and the French, and fundamentally the Danes would hold the northern parts of the Leeward Islands and the French would hold the southern parts. And then it all went wrong within about 20 minutes. Where the Danes attacked ports that the French thought they shouldn't attack, and the French didn't understand what was going up in a particular area, and it's very difficult to tell if this is now a war or a peace or what the hell's going on. It's definitely not going to win a Nobel Prize for Peace, whatever's happening up here. It's a bit nutso. I think when the Danes and the French looked like allying, that was probably either bad news for the Dutch or the British perhaps, or the pirates, I don't really know. There was talk that the pirates were going to come in and spank the Danes, I think, if they attacked any more French ports. It might have been the other way around, that never eventuated. But it's crazy bonkers over here in the Leeward Islands. So yeah, watch this space. Who knows what's going on over here. The Brits and the pirates are at full-blooded war now, probably the most exciting action of the week. Let's get stuck into it and have a look. So the week began very much with the Brits pushing in on the US, as the Brits had threatened to do, to take the whole Gulf. The Brits were making claim to the whole Gulf region. As it happened during the week, with the pirates and Brits beginning to come to full-blooded blows, the Brits did take a couple of ports, but then in negotiation with the US chose to leave the US with, I think it's San Maron, or Marennes or something in this neck of the woods. I'm not actually over familiar with this part of the world, despite the fact it's where many of you live. And also around Aise. So the Brits ran up hostility, but then let the Americans defend, thus increasing their tickets that they're earning, their conquest marks that they're earning for holding them. And right now there's a very tepid detente between the Brits and the US, and I, at the moment, don't expect the Brits to prosecute any more actions against the US, because the Brits' eyes have turned to the pirates. As I tried to cover in the political alignment, just general nut jobbery is going on down here. At one stage, the French were pushing into the Dominicas. The Danes and French, I think there was 8 port battles that changed hands or were defended in this neck of the woods. It was bazookas, lots of hostility grinding. I didn't actually see any reports of large full-blooded battles, so just maybe it's handbags at 12 o'clock. I don't really know what's going on here. I did have a French chap explain it to me, but he sort of explained it to me at the start of the week. And since then, it's all gone to hell in a handbasket. So if anybody's got any clue at all, my understanding is there was an agreement that the French would hold the southern end of the Antilles, the Danes would hold the north. I think the Danes then took a port off the Swedes, which the French didn't think was part of the deal, but the Danes said they'd done a deal with the Swedes. But it's very hard to tell actually what's going on. That pissed off the French. I think the Danes may have then raised hostility against another port that the French didn't think they could. And anyway, it's shits and giggles over here in the Leeward Islands right now. So it's, who knows, right? This is Bazooka Town. The Swedes did lose a port. They lost Boven Winds, or half of their territories, to the, I think it was to the Danes by the end of the week. That shows us the French. I think that ended up being to the Danes. So the Swedes lost a port there. Maybe the Boven Winds or Virgin Islands. I can't remember exactly which. The Brits, 4 or 5 nights on the trot, pushed hostility at Santiago to about 50%. And then the pirates would roll out in half a dozen first rates and a healthy flotilla of fourth rates and basically send the Brits running back home. There were some good little spats around this area, but very much it was the pirates were chasing the Brits away and sending them back home with their tails firmly planted between their legs. I think the highest hostility got was about 55%. The Dutch, so there are rumours that the Dutch want Cartagena and are going to prosecute an attack on Cartagena. That would surprise me because I know the Brits are going to defend it, and I know the Brits will defend anything up to this point and would probably look at reprisals should the Dutch come at them, which is of course well within the Dutch's rights to do. They're their own nation. If the Danes and the French get their shit sorted out, it might be in the best interest of the Dutch perhaps not to go to war with them. I think they might have to look for an alliance, just because on their own they'd probably get eaten by the pair of them. Not that these two at the moment could organise a piss up in a brewery together, but I think the Dutch would struggle if both of these forces came for them. The Spanish are still just not doing much at all. And the show of the week, really, what we'll spend most of the rest of the cast looking at, is the attack on Port-au-Prince. So after the Brits rather flimsily tried to flip Santiago on 3 or 4 nights and got rapidly spanked and sent packing out of the areas, the pirates managed to flip Port-au-Prince in just a couple of hours. Now, there's 2 reasons for this. First of all, they came down with a beautiful first-rate fleet, which makes life much easier to do the hostility. But they also know a trick that we Brits didn't know, which I'm going to share now as part of mutually assured destruction. So if you're grinding hostility, this is where I find out everybody knew about this apart from me, incidentally, but anyway, if you're grinding hostility in enemy waters, you'll be looking for fleets of that nation. So if the Dutch were trying to grind hostility in Cartagena, they would have to find British AI fleets and kill them. Our lovely darling devs give us 6 fleets per capital, but what you'll find is that 2 of these fleets will be dribblingly pathetic. They'll be about 150 BR. 2 of them will be terror fleets that, unless you've turned up with half a dozen first rates, will kick your ass. And 2 will be reasonable sort of 700, 800, 900 BR fleets. A simple way of looking at the maths of grinding is if you kill 1,000 BR fleet, you'll do about 10% hostility. So if you find a 700 BR fleet and kill it, you've got to do that 12 more times. And what the Brits were finding was there was so few fleets, it was such a meagre feast. And I'm not sure if it's because it's on a long stretch of land or if it's because the fleets sail out of waters, whereas in some of these other areas they sort of oscillate to and fro. I know around here when we were running hostility up, there were fleets every 2 seconds. It was very easy to do. But around here there was like 2 useful fleets. It was just abysmal. But what the pirates were doing, and maybe, like I say, maybe everybody knows this and I'm just a derp, is that if you say met a fleet of a Connie and 5 Essexes, and it was described as that, a Connie, 3 Essexes and 2 Renommées or whatever, about 1,000 BR. If you killed the whole fleet, it would randomly respawn somewhere in the Caribbean and make its way back. However, if you killed all the child ships, but not the ship that was listed as the head of the fleet, so Connie, Essex, kill the 2 Essexes. As soon as you exit battle, that fleet instantly respawns right next to you on the water. So you can just kill it again, and kill it again, and kill it again. So obviously, if you do that with a 1,000 BR fleet, you'll be able to run hostility up in a couple of hours, no worries at all. And if there's 2 groups of you, you're going to be fizzing. So I didn't know that, and I was chatting to a couple of folks, and everyone goes, oh yeah, the devs know about it, they left it in, it's kind of a feature to make raising hostility easier. Anyway, the pirates ran up hostility very quickly here. They were also aided by the fact a bunch of Brits turned up to try and stop them, only to discover that the pirates are all there in great big thumping 1st and 2nd rates, got their arses handed to them and helped them jump another 40% up on the hostility-ometer. And thus it was set for what would be my Saturday afternoon, what would be an American's late evening and a European's early morning, I think, that the battle for Port-au-Prince, the first true-blooded salvo in the pirate wars for the British, the Americans have been fighting the pirate wars for a while now, would begin. And what a battle it was, or the port battle wasn't a port battle, but what a afternoon of battles there were as the pirates descended upon the British defences, and many ships were sunk, captured and captured back by both forces. I have to say, before I get into this, I'm pretty sure it was probably a reasonable swap as far as death, devastation and captures were concerned. I had an absolute ball. I fought in a total of 8 battles from logging on to logging off, and that also involved 2 hours of setup before the battle as everybody got set up. And in fact, let's have a look at the anatomy of the day's goings on and the final repelling of the dirty rats from the Her Majesty's Port-au-Prince, His Majesty's. So here's a high-resolution satellite image from, this is our NASA satellite. This was Timmy, the cabin boy, was fired from the back of a Victory in a 68-pound carronade. And he rapidly sketched what he could see before he lost consciousness and fell back to the ocean. So thank you, Timmy, and our thoughts are with Timmy's family. But at least, you know, he's made a little piece of history more intelligible to the rest of us. So this here is Port-au-Prince. This is the island that splits the channel into Port-au-Prince. We call this Whale Island, and in this high-res image you can't see it, but there's shallows here that are like the tail of a whale, and this is the body of the whale. There's little islands around here and plenty of shallows to foul those heavy ships in. Port-au-Prince is a fourth-rate battle. The British 25-ship Agamemnon fleet assembled in port, most of them more than a day in advance, but all 25 were ready to go 2 hours before the port battle kicked off. And this was really due to 2 or 3 reasons. A number of the Brits who've now come over to global, and when I say Brits, they sail for the British nation. Many of them are Americans or Dutch. There's even a Scottish person, so that's great that the disabled can still gain. So the Brits assembled a full 2 hours, ahead of time, and they also posted some observation ships and little lynxes and basic cutters and other such ships around St. Mark, and trying to spot the exit from the pirate capital into the channel proper. So there was 2 or 3 guys sailing around here. 2 significant screening fleets were posted either side of Whale Island, only 4 or 5 minutes sail away from each other, depending on the wind, of course. It can be 15 minutes if the wind's from here to here. The wind for the port battle would be coming directly out of the east, I think. So essentially it was blowing across like this, which was a reasonably neutral wind. If the pirates could enter on the north side of the port, as it were, or the east side of the port, they would have had good egress into the outer port defences. And we'll see that. Let me just see if I can bring you up the map for Port-au-Prince. Hang on a second. Things I should have prepared earlier, including this. Come on, where are you, horrible thing? Play some music while we're waiting, and there it is. Sorry about that. So the wind essentially was blowing this way. So from, if you like, the Port-au-Prince little black tab here, across the port. If the pirates had managed to enter here, this outer green circle is the entry point. If they'd have managed to enter here, which is near the shallows, it would have been dangerous with screeners closing in on them. They would have had a great sail into here and easily been able to drive down into the heart of the British defences and send ships across here. Now you'll see this big red circle. This is a fort, and this has an excellent. This is one of the things they've improved with the patches, an excellent arc covering most of these circles here, and also giving a very thin choke point to come down for this. But the circle A, the primary defensive point, which is covered in itself by 2 Martello towers. Rather oddly, the pirates did appear to turn up without a mortar brig, so they were reasonably brave in that. So anyway, the Brits were in port. The wind was coming across here, so it was a neutral wind. If it had turned, if the wind had turned outwards, if you like, blowing towards Whale Island, that would have been a disaster for the pirates. If it had turned blowing inwards to the port proper, that could have given the British a great deal of trouble. But this wasn't the only British screening fleets. There was a second layer. Now these were smaller ships, 5th rates, some 4th rates, and they were picketed either side of Whale Island. And their job was to converge on any pirate screening fleet and ideally engage the pirate fleet proper. The pirates was first spotted coming out of what's this, St. Nicholas. Both their screening fleet, which comprised of about 10 or so 4th rates and similar ships, and their Aggie fleet proper. Now, I do have to say, sadly, I hope that this was just a noob and not some twat on his alt. But the pirates were pulled into battle very early on by a little shitter ship that sailed amongst them and tagged one of the British observation ships. Now, I don't know who that was. I honestly don't. If I did, I'd dob him in. And that's the truth, because I'm really pretty against all of this using alts bullshit. I know the guy who was tagged was one of the guys whose job it was to track the fleet and report it down to British Defence proper. But I don't know who the guy was. He was a relative lowbie, although on a year-old account. And he basically tagged one of the British spotter ships, and in doing so dragged in the whole Aggie fleet. Now, maybe it was just a noob, but like I say, the account was a year old. Maybe it was an inexperienced captain. Maybe he thought he could simply remove the spy ship without dragging in his whole fleet. But anyway, it was a bit disappointing and resulted in the pirates being held up for 5 or 6 minutes that they shouldn't do. Anyway, that was soon over, and the pirate screener fleet did its job and drew in what I'm sure the pirates thought was a good portion of the British screening contingent, and the fleet proper moved in, only to be engaged by the first serious set of defences that the British had set up, which was no match for a 25-man Aggie fleet, but it was a serious number of ships. Now, I know they lost quite heavily, but they did their job, because as they moved in to engage this fleet here, they held them up in combat for a significant amount of time. We then knew where the pirate fleet was, so we could then move our reserve fleet into position, as well as move the rest of our pickets to try and pick off any ships that tried to escape either engagement. The port battle then kicked off. The 25 Aggies in here all got their tokens without having to fire a shot, other than the idiots who were shooting at each other, because it's boring sitting there for 30 minutes, so why not shoot each other just in case the pirates do arrive. And then I have to say, the fun probably began proper. So first of all, these engagements up here with the initial pirate screening fleet, some of them rendered 90-minute long chases and battles and so on and so forth. This ended up as a bit of a flogging, to be honest, for the British screening fleet. It got trashed, really. Most of them sold their lives dearly, but held the pirates up long enough. Now, for me, this began at 11 o'clock, and I think my last and 8th battle was at about 5:30 p.m. in the afternoon, which I'm sure was 2:30 in the morning for many of the US-based players. The pirates, a few of them broke off and tried to run for it, and they got picked up and quite often gang-banged 5-1 and 10-1, and there was some awful tagging, so they'd get away and then they get tagged again. There was some great sort of 4-on-4s and 10s on 8s. There was some rubbish sort of 17 on 1s. I know a lot of British ships got sunk or captured. I know a lot of pirate ships got sunk or captured. I was involved in several myself. Probably the biggest battle outside of the original screening engagement was actually right at the end of the day. A lot of the British players were logging off, going to bed, going to work, whatever. And the main pirate Aggie fleet had pursued a couple of players around here, essentially come to the aid of one of their captains who was having his Aggie stolen off him. And then about a 20-man, predominantly Agamemnon fleet fell on top of a 15-man British fleet with only 10 Aggies in it. Thankfully, the commander of the British fleet, despite being Australian, proved to be relatively intelligent and ran a really good zigzaggy defence right across the front of the forts of Leogain, drawing the pirates onto the Martello Towers and the fort that protects Leogain, or Legolas as we like to call it. The pirates were drawn in. Now, when they came into battle, they were very strung out. The pirates were drawn into battle, But as they got closer and closer to the ever-retreating and zigzagging lines, sometimes the Brits were circling. What were the horses called in the Roman times? The Carthaginian wheel, where you would ride in a ever-retreating circle, constantly shooting as you did, making it very hard for your opponent ever to engage. Drew the pirates right onto the forts. I think the pirates managed to pull off one of the smaller ships and give him a jolly good slapping by the shore. But eventually the pirates were taking quite a lot of damage, mostly from the forts. They were finding it very frustrating that the Brits weren't being really stupid and throwing themselves 15 into 20 and probably BR'd by 5-3 into the jaws of the angry pirates. And I must admit, when you're in a battle and your opponent starts abusing you because your tactics are denying you the kill, I always think, well, that's it. We've done our job here. But the pirates came on until the damage really from the forts began to get a bit tetchy, and a few of their ships began to disengage. And then there was that dangerous moment where half their fleet could have disengaged and half their fleet could have been sucked into the more proper. But they kept their discipline and they withdrew as a unit, and that battle frittered out, and that was the end of the day, and the battle for Port-au-Prince, a battle that probably saw over 100 captains, maybe quite considerably more than 100 captains involved in, to be honest, what we all love about this game. Now, I know their fleet didn't get in. To be honest, they didn't have a mortar brig, so I think they were a bit nuts. And we don't know which way the wind would have turned. But if it would have turned, it was a hard port to take anyway. It's always hard attacking. So they didn't get in, but some of the fighting out here, there's pirates smashed the Brits' primary screening fleet. These screeners did pretty good against the pirates. Probably honours even as far as timber sunk and swapped. Maybe the pirates sunk more crappy British ships. And that was about it. And tip of the hat and a thanks to the pirates for bringing the fun. I had a number of good battles. I had a number of times where we massively outnumbered the enemy, and a number of occasions where we were a little bit outnumbered and had to run away. But that's what it's all about, yeah. Only an idiot sails into a fair fight, as they say. So that was the battle for Port-au-Prince, and the opening of what is, I think, the main game for the Brits, at least, which will be the war against the pirates, unless the Danes and the Frenchies decide to get stuck in, or if the Cloggies get grumpy monkeys and come down here. Now, this might give the Americans respite in order to perhaps wrest Savannah back or have an assault on the Bahamas. Whether or not the US has still got the mettle for it after the previous week's disgruntlements at Savannah, we shall only see over time. Let's have a look at where the hotspots are for ganking and other horrors and terrors. So all along this coast, of course, the channel here around Mortimer Town and Pap and Santiago. The French, the pesky French, third rates Bolognas. 3 Bolognas came up here and a couple of smaller ships. They attacked a victory up around Belize. It got away. In fact, it killed the little bugger that was attacking it. But I believe the Frenchies captured a victory near Belize. So have a look at that for a sail in third rates. Hey, there's a day's play in it. They would have sailed up around here, maybe had a play around KPR, headed down to Belize, and yeah, there's an afternoon's play, and they were rewarded with a victory at the end of it, you French bastards. Well done, lads. See if you can hold on to that. These will be the hot spots, though, for ganking, spanking, and losing your traders to hungry monkeys. Where will the biffo be next week? Well, down here in the Antilles, where no one knows what's going on. You can't imagine peace breaking out. Maybe it will. And if it does, which way will it push? Will it push onto the Brits? Will it push onto the Cloggies? Will it push onto the pirates? Almost impossible to tell. I believe the opening salvos have been sounded. The pirates have demonstrated that they have an excellent fleet. The British demonstrated that they've got great organisation, and captains prepared to throw their ships onto the line. And that's the ingredients we need, isn't it? We need the commitment of one side to be prepared to fight and the commitment of the other side to meet it. So no matter how that goes, that is fun happening right there for any captain who's up for it. The Americans, have they got the ghoulies to give the pirates a go? I'd certainly be making it. If I was an American, my job would be to kill a pirate every day. It's that sort of occupation, guerrilla warfare, and then strike and take your land back. But anyway, maybe there isn't enough Americans, I don't know. What's been going on more broadly? Well, nothing new from the devs and no hints of new. I don't know what's coming next. I've been a bit busy at work, so I might have missed some worm sign in the forums, but what are you going to give us next? Where's my raids? Or new ships or new content. Where is it? Numbers on global are steady. I know the other servers, they've had probably a bigger percentage drop off than us. Our numbers are steady, and it isn't the heady days of 350 captains going out to war on the same day that in a series of 6 coordinated port battles that perhaps I was enjoying a year ago. But if you're in a 10-man versus a 10-man, or a 4-man versus a 4-man, or a 2v2, it's as much fun as you can have for that 90 minutes, so it doesn't really matter what's happening in the rest of the world. Although I know the pirates were a bit pissed off that somebody snagged them, be it a noob or an alt hacker cheat bastard coming out here. And this is the wrong map. Jesus, Jeheil, remember to update it. All the fights we were in, generally the chat decorum was good. And generally there was sort of an acceptance you'd got yourself into a spot of bother, or the poking was appropriately barbed, but mostly tipping of hats. War is on, definitely between the Brits and the pirates, definitely between the American and the pirates, and this is not jobbery going. This is beautiful madness between the French and the Danes, with the poor Swedes caught in the middle and the Dutch probably not knowing what's going on around them. Finally, on to the tally of splinters, sail and blood. The Brits had a good week. There's a mathematical error in this, and I don't know why. I think it's because I took it just before downtime, so my count struggled with ports that were in the middle of being swapped, so I'll fix it up for next week, but it's more or less right. The Brits gained 11 ports with the 2 sets that they took off the Americans. The pirates, no net gains this week. The Danes lost a small amount. The French gained. Now, some of that was off the Danes and some of that was off the Swedes. I think that should be minus 11. I think that's probably the problem there. I think the US is probably down 11 ports. Yeah, so that's it. That's it for this week's naval action. I had plenty of fun. It's good to see the different nations sort of using their different tactics and approaches against everybody. It was beautiful to see the numbers that turned out for the Battle of Port-au-Prince. And like I say, we might be a smaller population on our global server, but there was 100+ of us on a Saturday morning, afternoon or evening, maybe a Friday evening for some of you, who had a ball. So hats off to everyone who turned up and got stuck in, and let's have some more of that. And if you're an alt, stop being a twat and don't tag and bullshit things up and don't join port battles and all that sort of stuff. 95%, 99% of the biffo that went on at the Battle of Port-au-Prince was good, honest murder, which is what we want. That's it for me. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. I'll see you in the ocean, and I will catch you.